The boat project list is far from completed, and it seems like every time we fix one problem, another problem arises. This video is a summary of the work we have done from Thanksgiving 2014, when we bought Freya, until February 2017, where we are now near Marsh Harbor, Bahamas.
Billy and QP constantly on the lookout for coconuts. QP can never have enough coconuts. Is that right, Willie? She makes you the packing mule.
This is a compilation of about 2 years worth of boat projects on our wonderful Freya. We thought it was about time to make a before and after video showing what we've done so far to make Freya our own. We bought our 1974 Cal 246 almost sight unseen. First we agreed to buy her, then we met Michelle, Greg's wife, at a truck stop near Richmond, Virginia, and she drove us to have our first look. I fell in love immediately. QP, well, she was happy to have a home other than the truck. QP wanted a new modern style boat. I wanted much, much more. Freya has 43 years of experience. She's thick-skinned, very heavy-duty, comfortable, stable, dependable, and safe. She's old-fashioned with traditional lines and a sail plan divided into 3 parts so that she can be easily sailed by an older couple. In 2014, Greg and Michelle were the first guests on Freya for a Thanksgiving dinner and mortgage burning party. We finally had a boat of our own to call home. Previously, Freya was known as Argonauta. QP wanted to name whatever boat we bought after a Nordic goddess and settled on Freya after seeing some images online. I changed the name of the boat to Naut. So today we're going to live on Naut, and tomorrow we'll live on Freya. Our old Freightliner truck was named Tinkerbell, and she was responsible for paying for Freya. So we decided to name the dinghy Tink the Dink in her honor. Our first big job was the bottom paint. While stripping off the old paint from the hull and rudder, we found one blister on the rudder. So we ground out the delaminated area, reworked the fiberglass, applied 2 coats of barrier coat, then waited for everything to completely dry. Next, we applied 2 coats of black bottom paint, then 3 coats of blue bottom paint. Our thinking is, when we see the black, it's time to repaint. I don't remember the name of the Ooh La La special prop paint, but it's not so special. When we pulled Freya out after only 6 months in the water, the hull was clean, but the prop was fuzzy. Considering all the time and effort we spent painting the bottom, it's hard to believe that there were still spots to touch up on the way to the water. Greg, the previous owner and my hero, was a true sailor. His navigational system consisted of a compass, paper charts, and 2 depth sounders. We, however, are not so clever. First, we had to remodel the binnacle, then fashion a new grab rail and table. We removed the old pods and the grab rail, drilled out the old grab rail holes for the new bigger size, cut down the table, and made a stainless steel cover to hide all the ugly stuff, and installed a new bigger grab rail. We did manage to save the original compass. Then we added a nav pod with a chart plotter, wind instruments, radar, depth, speed, and temperature sensors, down vision fish finder, and an autopilot, all from Ray Marine. For safety, we upgraded the old system to 3 new radios, an AIS receiver, EPIRB for Freya, and another EPIRB on QP's life jacket, and finally made some accessible pouches to store our life jackets. Freya also has 8 guest life jackets, which are stored in a special bag in the lazarette when guests are not on board. We also have backup handheld equipment, a chart plotter, GPS, bearing compass, and paper charts. We should have a sextant. When I was at sea in the distant past, I would make noon sightings every day, but never got more accurate than 3 miles. Unless you keep in practice, a sextant is rather useless. And as you know by now, I am quite lazy. So lazy that I still have not read the instructions for setting up the autopilot. The first aid kit was supposed to be complete, but we seem to always be adding to it as we find new needs. The ditch bag is on the boat project list, but not yet ready to go. QP always wanted an inflatable RIB, but I know I'm lazy, so I wanted something I had to row. If we had an RIB, I would always use an engine and never row. How does that help my blood sugar and blood pressure problems? Eventually, I won, and QP agreed to buy a Gig Harbor rowing dinghy. She has not been happy since. Eventually, we did compromise on the rowing dinghy with a new 2.5 horsepower Yamaha motor. Not sure why the motor makes her feel safe, but she stopped complaining.
Since you can't go lobstering, you're going to go rowing to get you exercise, huh? Okay, I'm timing you. How quick can you get ashore? Stroke! Stroke! Come on, you can do better than that. 30 seconds. Stroke. Took him 2.5 minutes. Not bad for an old man in his 50s.
Greg had a roll-up inflatable dinghy and no need for davits or chocks, but I had to have a rowing dinghy and therefore needed both. We found some leftover epi-wood pieces from a dock rebuild in Deltaville. Now we have chocks to store the dinghy on the foredeck. This is going to be our dinghy chocks. When we get it up on the boat, it will look like after we get everything sanded, it will look like that with one of these on each side. And then we can pick our dinghy up and set on top of this. Oh, for the bow. We also finished installing the dinghy davits that came with the boat. We discovered that 2 jam cleats were needed to make hoisting the dinghy easier. Freya has both a spinnaker pole and a whisker pole. Great sailors tell me that those are great things to have on board. That may be true if you know what to do with them. QP nor I knew how to use either of them. We also could not find anywhere to attach the poles to the mast. We started looking at the other boats and saw that spinnaker rings had been mounted on the mast. We went ahead and mounted a spinnaker ring like a real sailboat. Since we didn't know what to do with the poles, and QP and I are getting up in years, I could only think of one use for the spinnaker pole. A crane boom to put the dinghy on the foredeck.
Rotors teaching QP how to work the ropes.
We have since used the whisker pole correctly under the direction of Clay on the sailing vessel Swedish Fish. The original engine panel was mounted low in the cockpit where it was impossible to see from the helm. While driving Tinkerbell, I scanned the gauges every few minutes. The engine panel had to be relocated to a visible location. Since the tachometer did not work and the other gauges were old and difficult to read, QP authorized replacing it with a new panel. Here it is remounted where it can easily be monitored while at the helm. A shadow box with plexiglass cover is still on the boat project list. At one point along the ICW, we had to follow one channel out into the inlet, turn towards land, and follow a different channel back inland. At this turning point, the waves were pretty rolly, and the fuel in the tanks sloshed around. You guessed it, a few hours later the engine died. No major problem. We simply switched to the other tank and we were on our way again. Result? Clean the fuel tanks just moved to the top of the boat project list. The old charging system for the engine alternator went through a Balmar external charging module. Since I'm a stubborn old truck driver, I wanted a system that I could understand and repair. Now Freya has a charging system just like our old 18-wheeler, with the addition of solar panels. I added a lee cloth in the engine room to keep all of our parts and tools from flying into the engine in rough weather. This proved to be a good idea because when we arrived at West End after a very rough crossing, the lee cloth had done its job.